Right-minded sort of man. But he was brought up very strictly, which means that everyone most plausible way, you might almost say in the most necessary way, it had been a long time since anyone had washed any of the blankets in the house, which contains, as you may know, a large number of rooms. These things start in the most ordinary way. My father thought that it would be best that each time a blanket had to be changed, it would be done in the simplest fashion. That is, the dirty blanket would be changed for a clean blanket, and the dirty one would be put in the cellar. Father figured we'd wait until there were enough dirty blankets to wash them all in one go, which would be cheaper. Time went on, and the blankets were gradually accumulating in the cellar. My father was horrified, so he decided to go to the Capitol to look for some workmen. The blankets, as there wasn't any more room in the cellar, began to invade the best bedrooms on the first floor, which would have been an enormous hindrance to us, because then we'd have had to have a new fire escape built on the outside. Well, as I was saying, the situation was daily becoming worse. My father decided to go to the Capitol himself to engage the workmen. But unfortunately, all the workmen were on strike, so no one was interested in my father's offer. So then he decided to promise them double pay, which didn't really satisfy them. Not that they thought the wages insufficient, but they were afraid of anger among their comrades. In the meantime, I was looking after the house and trying to stow the blankets in the most rational possible way so they'd take up less room. But unfortunately, in spite of all my efforts, they went on accumulating more and more. And worst of all, there was a danger of them blocking the main staircase. I reported all of this to my father in several letters, which were unanswered. I was surprised by this, and at his staying away so long, telephoned to tell where he was living. And they told him that he'd gone away, gone without leaving an address. This dismayed me, all the more so, as the blankets had already begun to invade the main staircase, and the staircase, which had been built to give direct access to the second floor, was very unsafe, and could easily collapse one fine day, which wouldn't have been so tragic if one of us had been in the road at the time, but which would have been serious if we'd all been on the second floor, because then no one would have been able to build a new staircase to replace the old one. Well, as I was saying, the situation was becoming more and more tragic. The blankets, in a few days, had invaded the main staircase and cut off half our communications, and were seriously threatening the second floor. Then, my father reappeared with about 100 men. Though we never found out where he got them from, it was odd. They were all in chains. My father explained that with all the strikes on these days, it was best to force workmen to work. So, he immediately had some enormous boilers installed, and for the next few months, the workmen washed the blankets. My father thought it would be best to hang them in the park, as there was enough room for them all to be hung up. To start with, the workmen hung them in a certain order, parallel to the boilers. But unfortunately, there were so many blankets that they began to take up all the vacant space. So very gradually, in a meticulous sort of way, this kind of labyrinth of blankets that the park has become came into being. And although the workmen started out in chains, my father removed them later, because as the labyrinth was such a great distance between the last clotheslines and the boilers, they'd have needed exceptionally long chains, which were impossible to find. So that very gradually, under the cover of the night, they went away, and there wasn't a single one left. The present situation is very critical for my father. The
I'm not here for good.
I hope that's how it is. It would be very surprising if you were to be in the house or the park without my father knowing it. Because my father knows everyone who lives in the house. And I think I can say, without fear of being mistaken, that I know them all too. Or nearly all.
I'm thirsty.
We have to take into account my father's perfect organization. We can be quite sure that nothing happens in the park without my father knowing about it. There only has to be one blanket missing. Only one. And just think, there must be millions and millions for him to notice at once. And if he doesn't immediately, in person, take up the matter with whoever has stolen it, it's simply because at the moment he's busy with other much more important things. But there's not the slightest doubt that sooner or later, according to an order which is too complicated for me and incomprehensible, he will settle the matter and settle it with perfect impartiality, taking into consideration all the circumstances which either incriminate or vindicate the accused. That's why things here...
I'm very thirsty.
As I was saying, that's why things here appear to be in some disorder. But it's only an apparent disorder which throws into relief the existence of a superior order, which is much too exigent and complex for us to imagine. My father controls it with a skill which is of exceptional efficiency.
But then how do you explain this labyrinth of blankets which came into being? According to what you said, because your father showed such a lack of foresight, that he let the blankets pile up in the cellar and obstruct the view of the house.
I'm very thirsty.
I consider that a fair question, and I would have asked myself the same thing 1,000 times if I didn't know my father. Oh, but the solution is much simpler than that. I've already told you that my father observes a strict order in the affairs he deals with, which sometimes leads him to solve some problems which seem insignificant to us, but which must be dealt with before others which we imagine to be more important. This is merely a consequence of the difference between our scale of values and that of my father's. For instance, I told you that when the pile of blankets had risen so dangerously up to the first floor, I telephoned my father at the hotel. They told me he'd gone away, gone, without leaving an address. After detailed inquiry, I heard, though perhaps it wasn't true, that he'd spent a month in a town long way away, forgetting the business of the blankets and completely absorbed in picking certain herbs reputed to cure chiblains. I mean it when I say I'm not sure of the accuracy of my facts, because my father's life is a real mystery. But there's a good chance that they are true. In any case, this way of behaving is peculiarly his own. The case I was telling you of is a perfect illustration of what I'm trying to prove to you, which is that my father has a strict order, and he has a scale of values that is very different from ours. And his priorities obey a rigorous and impenetrable system, which, in spite of its absurdity, turns out to be the best in the long run. As I've been able to observe 1,000 times.
I'm thirsty.
Where are you going?
There!
I don't think that's necessary. Does something bother you? Just tell me what surprised you. I'll explain everything.
I don't see why I should be surprised. Tell me why I should be surprised.
No reason. No reason.
As I was saying, my father's order is a complete enigma for us. How can anyone justify spending his time picking herbs to cure chiblains when the situation in the house is becoming so tragic because of the blankets? Especially if you take into account that no one in the house has ever had chiblains, and that on the other hand, the efficacy of these herbs has been denied in the most categorical fashion by the best doctors, who even go so far as to state that the value of these herbs is based on superstition and witchcraft.
Yes. But how shall I ever be able to get out of here?
Unless you're very lucky, or get direct help from my father, you needn't hope to get out.
But I can get out of here with you.
Impossible. Unfortunately, it's impossible.
Can't you get out either then?
Well, of course I can. Do you think I'd venture into the labyrinth if I couldn't get out again?
Then when you leave, let me come with you.
Oh, I'm afraid that's something I couldn't do for you, even if it's what I wanted most in all the world. As I've told you, my father obeys a strict order in the affairs he deals with. And he's figured out a very cunning scheme for me to get out of the park, even if I happen to be in the remotest part of the labyrinth. This scheme, like all my father's schemes, is simple but effective. It's this bell. Every time I ring it, a servant arrives. I ring it until the servant who is dumb arrives. A dumb servant, so he can't reveal his secret to anyone.
How many servants are there?
That's something I've never been able to find out before. So far, it's always been a different servant who's come and fetched me. Which must mean there's more than 1,000, or maybe even more. Maybe less. My calculations in these matters are only guesswork, which means that I may be wrong. In any case, they're all dumb, and none of them has ever been able to tell me the secret of the way back to the house. A secret my father must reveal to them.
But none of this stops me from coming with you.
Let me finish my explanation. Your questions, as always, are reasonable. That's why I have to explain to you in detail all the factors, all the problems, so as to arrive at an accurate and comprehensible solution. As I've told you, when I ring the bell, a servant arrives in a surprisingly short time. Sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes just a few seconds, while I'll have been walking the labyrinth for hours and hours. And he leads me back to the house. It's all the same to me whether you come with me or not. There are insuperable obstacles. First of all, you have to take into account the extreme susceptibility of the servant, who's prepared to serve people of the house, but not strangers, which is logical. How do you suppose I could make him serve you? You, an outsider! I suppose I could ask him, just to do you a favor, even though I know the chances are very unlikely of him taking you. And that's not the worst. This labyrinth is torturous. The blankets are so close together, they're almost touching. You must have noticed you can only make progress by moving them one at a time. It's absolutely impossible for the servants to guide two people. Every time I've tried it, the person with me has disappeared just a few minutes after starting through the blankets. Then later, the servants have found his dead body. As you'll realize, this means taking a completely useless risk. If you go with me, there's not the slightest chance of your getting out again. On the other hand, if you try to get out on your own, the difficulties are the same, but the risks are less. As people seem to have a natural sense of direction, they always come back to their point of departure. That's to say, this sort of island. It's the only privileged place in the park. And it's exactly in the center of the park, as you may perhaps know.
I'm thirsty!
As you'll have been able to realize, the business of the blankets has caused us nothing but trouble. And there's extremely little likelihood of the situation getting any better.
I'm thirsty!
We've really had very little luck. Things have gotten more and more complicated in a simple but implacable fashion. I see you've managed to get the chain loose at least.
What chain?
What chain do you think? The one you were tied up by over there.
Yes.
It's always the same. I'm sick and tired of telling him that that method's no good, that it's easy to file through manacles. But he never listens to me. But anyway, it's all the same to me. Whether manacles can be filed through or not, whether it's a good method or not, doesn't much matter. And anyway, you want to get out of here as soon as possible.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's logical. It seems to me very unlikely, very difficult, as I've already explained.
But it's not impossible then.
Impossible. Really impossible. Everything in life is possible.
I'm thirsty!
As I've explained, it's quite obvious that nothing in life is impossible. But it seems to me that what you want to do is one of the most difficult things to put into practice. But To prove my good faith and the sincerity of my offers, I'm going to do everything it's in my power to do for you. Call my father so that he can find the best solution for you.
Do you think they'll have heard the bell in the house?
Of course not. Even if the bell rang much more loudly, they wouldn't hear it in the house. The distance between us and them is immense. But to remedy this little drawback, my father has come up with a rather scheming system. He's posted a series of servants all along the park. I've never seen them, you must realize, who pass on from one to the other, call for the information that my father wants to hear. All this is done with fantastic speed, so there's not the slightest delay in my father finding out what's going on. The whole thing now is to find out whether he wants to come immediately or whether we'll have to wait a long time. If you climb on my shoulders, you'll be able to see if he's coming or not. Fortunately, the blankets get higher and higher, so you won't be able to see anything beyond a radius of 100 yards. Come on.
You want me to climb on your shoulders?
Yes.
I'm heavy.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Last time there was a flood, my father made me carry all the servants to safety on my shoulders. At first, this work seemed exhausting. I had to carry each servant nearly 2 miles, drop them off in the shelter, and then rush back to the house to get the next one. But I got used to it in the end. And at the end of a month, I could say I hardly felt any weight at all. Come on, climb on my shoulders. Can you see anything? Huh?
No.
Look again!
Yes, but who is it?
Oh, it can't be anyone but my father!
But that's the man who put me in the labyrinth and put the manacles on me. Let me go. Do let me.
You see my father's meticulous organization? I called him just a few minutes ago, and here he is already. There really isn't the slightest doubt that he controls everything that goes on in the park. He must have been shut up in the laboratory. Look at the manacles still hanging from his ankle. He's going to break it, and now he wants at all costs to escape from the park. He's tried to buy me in every possible way to achieve his end. First of all, he promised me a vast sum of money, and then he proposed marriage to me. Oh, he tried to seduce me in the most lamentable fashion. And then finally he proposed to me his plan of rebellion against you and me, your authority, in which the two of us would seize the house and park.
Well, Miss Hill, please don't believe what she's telling you. This young man's plan.
Oh, you can imagine. A piece of rank stupidity, devoid of the most elementary common sense. He wanted me to help him set fire to the park. He maintained that as the blankets burned very easily, the fire would soon assume gigantic proportions, and the house and everything would be destroyed. Everything was razed to the ground, and the servants and everyone in the house dead. And you too. Then we would sell most of the park, and with the money we get from it, he and I would build a house where he and I and a few servants would live.
It really is lamentable. But so she's lying to you.
Naturally, I didn't listen to any of his suggestions. And all the time I was trying to persuade you from them.
You did very well. Individuals of this sort are very dangerous, especially when one allows oneself to be deceived by their appearance of being so calmly good, which conceals their perfidious intentions. Leave him to me, my girl. His punishment will fit his crime. I will deal with this man personally. Now, you may go and see your fiancé. I must ask you, young man, to excuse my daughter. Take it in good part, there's nothing that can be done. All I ask is that you don't contradict her, and so not to aggravate her mental imbalance. In any case, as a rule, everything she says is of very little importance. Her evidence has almost no chance of being accepted by any court.
Well, if that's the case, Monsieur, then I completely absolve her. But I must admit to you that while she was making up all those lies about me, that I couldn't stop myself from hating her with all my heart.
I'm very grateful to you for being so understanding.
Was it all lies too, then, what she said about the labyrinth?
Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't. She made some colossal mistakes. She could have misled you. Not out of malice. Every time she needs to tell lies. But because she doesn't remember things very well. Her memory is very poor. She forgets all the most important details. Substitutes them and changes them and substitutes other very precise facts for them. For instance, She told you that I spent a month in a town, a long way away. The blankets were piling up. It's becoming dangerous. Picking herbs to cure chill blades. That's completely untrue. Actually, I spent a month in that town picking herbs to cure corns, not chill blades. I did twice the sun. That's why we must excuse her. We must take a chance to what she says and never get angry. That's what I do. What I'm asking you to do.
Yes, Monsieur. I promise you, I won't get cross.
Well, throwing flares at the first point, let's move on to the next. You want to get out of the park, don't you?
Yes, Monsieur.
My daughter's already explained to you the rather unusual circumstances we are in because of the blankets. You can't imagine how much I regret that you should be a victim, even temporarily, of this situation. Believe me, I deplore it even more than you do. Do you realize the delicate situation I am in? In relation to my guests and friends and prisoners and servants who come to the house? There's not the slightest doubt that that's one of my gravest worries at the moment.
I can understand it.
Don't know if you're aware of it, but every day thousands and thousands of people pass through my house. Guests, prisoners, friends, clients, and many other people.
Kiss me, Bruno. Kiss me. My body belongs to you. Caress my breast.
You can't imagine how delighted I am at my daughter's romantic behavior. She's just a child. She doesn't see any harm in it. She's just a child. I'm completely satisfied. I'm lucky to have a daughter like that, especially these days when everything is so unstable. Just a child. Innocence personified. Such a touching love story, too. Especially when you take into account the highly unusual circumstances of having still to set them. But let's not change the subject. Getting out of the park is a real problem, as you know very well. Fortunately, there is a solution. It's complicated, it's true, but still, it's a solution. In principle, your case has to be dealt with by a judge who represents the Supreme Tribunal. Given that you have that manacle on your ankle, which won't make matters any easier for you, as might as well tell you from the start.
But I'm wearing this manacle, not because I've done anything wrong or committed any crimes, but, well, just as an ornament.
You needn't worry in the slightest. In actual fact, you'll appear before the Supreme Tribunal simply to comply with the bureaucratic formality. If, as you state, you are not guilty, the judge, after a superficial investigation, and after he's filled under requisite forms, will immediately set you free and allow you the help of the servants who will do their very best to lead you out of the labyrinth.
Good. I want to get out as soon as possible. But can I avoid the court formalities?
Kiss me, Bruno. Kiss me. My body belongs to you.
Absolutely impossible. The judge has to carry out his investigation, not only on account of that accursed manacle, which makes you suspect from the start, but also to comply with the regulations.
Do I have to be investigated by the judge, too?
He has to give you an exit permit. This has been the rule ever since they discovered how little the law was respected. Because after considerable research, they managed to discover that in a single year, 11,000 people against whom proceedings were pending had got out of the park. And many of them were accused of very serious offenses, what's more. This is because there had been no check on people coming into and going out of the park. I remember distinctly that in those days you only needed to ask for an exit permit to get one immediately. Fortunately, they put a stop to all that now. And now everyone coming into and going out of the labyrinth has to be investigated by the judge.
Then I have to be investigated by the judge?
Naturally, there are no exceptions. I already told you that there was a great deal of abuse. That's why the judges are so severe now. Perhaps a bit too much so. But however you look at it is necessary. What I can do for you is speed up the proceedings.
What do you mean speed up the proceedings?
I mean, I can try and arrange for your trial to take place as soon as possible. In general, you have to wait at least a month.
I can't wait that long.
They nearly always say, I can't wait that long. But what do you suppose they can do when the number of trials is increasing all the time? Do you think they can sell them all just like that?
It's not my fault there are more trials.
No, in theory it's not your fault. And yet, if we were to examine the problem a little more closely, we should come to the conclusion in the end that, like all the other individuals who have passed through this park, you are guilty. Indirectly, if you like, of this state of affairs. You are neither more nor less than one more link in a chain that has been formed, is being formed, and will continue to be formed out of the increasing number of trials investigated by the tribunal. I already told you that I try to have your case dealt with as soon as possible. There's a trick I'll do. A trick which, naturally enough, is perfectly legal. Because you'll quite understand. I wouldn't break the law, even to help you. I'll explain. The judges have had very strict orders that they must deal with these matters in a strict chronological order. Exceptions can be made, though, if I remember rightly, in the following case. If the individual is found in the park without liable to be subject to another tribunal, then they can appear immediately. And this precisely applies in your case. That manacle around your ankle makes you particularly suspect. Thanks to this detail, you'll be able, legally, to be dealt with by the tribunal before your turn.
Good. That's what I want.
I must warn you, though, that this provision is a two-edged weapon. Because the judges of the emergency tribunal who investigate cases like yours are very severe. They have some excuse. They're used to trying criminals of the worst type, who maintain their innocence with the greatest cynicism. That's why they tend to be suspicious at first. I might even go so far as to say they take no notice of the testimony of the accused. But after all, it isn't too serious if they make a mistake, because the accused goes on afterwards to a higher tribunal, and they do consider the evidence when they try him.
I've nothing to be afraid of.
We shouldn't exaggerate. And anyway, this first tribunal is only concerned with fact-finding. It's very rare for it to condemn the accused directly.
But this trial can condemn people?
I told you. That in theory, it only inquires into the facts of the case. But in certain cases, where there is absolutely no doubt of the accused's guilt, but when he is obviously dangerous, the tribunal will take it upon itself to decide to punish him without reference to the higher tribunal. The punishment can sometimes even be death penalty.
Doesn't matter. I want to be tried as soon as possible.
You can choose. Either wait your turn, or else be tried quickly by the emergency tribunal, which will treat you, as I've told you, very severely. All the more so as it will take your medical into account. Tell me, which do you choose?
You'll be tried as soon as possible.
Kiss my thighs. Kiss me.
Isn't that sweet? Excuse me, I get so easily sidetracked. We were saying, yes, you say you want to be tried by the emergency tribunal.
Yes, Monsieur.
Would you like me to go now and fetch a judge who investigates cases like yours?
Yes, if you can.
I'll go at once then. I can't promise to come back right away because the judge may not be in his office for the moment. I may have to wait for him. In any case, I'll try to come back as soon as possible. See how these things are? I too am curious about your case, and I shall be interested to hear the verdict, so... Bye then, young man.
Go ahead, Monsieur.
He's gone.
Yes, but he said he'd be back as soon as possible.
You never know.
What do you mean you never know?
Well, you never know if he'll be back at once or a long time after.
Of course.
You don't believe me.
But I do believe you.
I'm not joking. I've known lots of cases like yours. I'm only too well aware.
Naturally.
I can see you don't believe me.
But I do believe you.
No, don't pretend. I know what's going on. My father said I was mad. He said that you must humor me, didn't he? And in any case, you must resent me, telling all those bad things about you, don't you?
Naturally. Do you suppose I liked it?
You mustn't attach so much importance to it.
I don't attach the slightest importance to it.
You're quite right. It's not my fault my father poisoned me.
Of course.
Don't say it like that. It's true. That's my father. emergency tribunal judge. He's a very cruel judge. He treats the accused with contempt. He hardly ever allows them to speak or defend themselves. He pees on them. He sticks pins in them, belches in their mouths, and ties them hand and foot, even bites them sometimes. It's true, though, that in some cases he can be extremely polite, but this is rare. What's worse is no one, or practically no one, ever gets off.
Oh, but I shall. I'm innocent. I haven't done anything wrong. And when I'm free, I'll get you out of here.
Thank you. Very good to me.
I can't allow your father to treat you that way.
You mustn't worry about me. You have to worry about yourself. You'll have your work cut out for you getting out on your own. He's hanged himself. To be expected. Help me. We have to hide the body.
Hide it. Why?
If the judge finds the corpse, he'll accuse you of murder. Help me!
What do you want me to do?
I'll put it in the park. Farthest away place away from here.
Right. I'll help you.
That's the best way to hide a body. The park's so big, no one should be able to find him. Help me! Take his legs!
Let me take his shoulders. They're heavier.
No! Do what I say! Come on!
Is this far enough?
No. Come on.
How about here?
No. You've got to take him farther. Come on. This should be far enough. Put him here. No one should find him here.
If someone does find him, what'll happen?
Your cause will be lost.
When did Bruno arrive at the laboratory?
No. He's always been here, and I've always found him tied up. Ever since I was a small child.
Weren't you sorry for him?
Yeah, I was at first. I used to come and pee in front of him in the morning, 'cause he liked that. He looked very happy when he watched me. And then we'd play together. I'd bring buckets of sand and he'd bury my feet. He was always very hard to play with. 'Cause he was always tied up and very ill.
Has he always been ill?
Oh, yes, always. He used to bleed all the time. And then no one would change his clothes. Blood would dry on his shirt and suit. I used to bring him chocolates and almonds to give him a treat. And needles, especially lots of needles,
What do you use the needles for?
to prick me with. When I was small, he'd just prick my legs. And then when I became a woman, he'd prick my breasts and my stomach.
And you let him do it?
Of course, why not?
That must have been very painful.
Yes, it was almost intolerable. And then he wouldn't let me cry or scream.
Why did you go and see him then?
Because I was bored. When I was with him, I got hurt, but at least I wasn't bored.
He was a monster then.
Yeah. And that wasn't the worst. The worst thing was that he'd always tell my father about it. My father had strictly forbidden me to take him anything or to go and see him. He always used to tell my father, though, and then my father would beat me.
Your father told me you were his fiancé.
That's just a figure of speech. He liked to tell people that, but I wasn't really. But on the other hand, it wasn't completely false either. That's why he ordered me to take him in my arms and kiss him as passionately as possible. He was never passionate enough for his liking, though.
And you were going to marry him.
No, not that. It wouldn't have been possible. He could have never left the lavatory.
Why?
Oh. My father said that he came here one day, like you did, and that he's been here ever since.
Was he found guilty by the judge?
You never know much about that sort of thing.
He said that he was innocent, and that I must intercede for him.
Yes, he used to say the same to everyone.
What do you mean, everyone?
Yes, to everyone who used to spend a few days with him in the labyrinth.
He told me he'd always been on his own.
Yeah, he had. But that didn't stop him from now and then having a companion chained to him at the ankle. But they always managed to file through the manacles and escape, and he was left on his own.
And what happened to them?
My father will have dealt with them. I don't think any of them ever managed to get out. They were always extremely nice to me. They felt sorry for me, promised to get me out of here. Always full of hope. It was a pleasure to come and have a chat with them.
Yadam, yadam, da 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 dum, yada da 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 dum, yadam, yadam, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, yadam, yadam, da 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 dum, da 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 da. Ya dum da dum, ya da 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 dum, ya da 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 dum, ya dum da 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 dum, da 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 dum, ya dum da 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 dum.
Take your seats. No, not yet. Take your seats. Didn't you hear what I said? I have vaguely been informed of your case. I hope that you aren't going to make me waste too much time and that you'll state the facts as concisely as possible and with all the necessary exactitude.
Well, in actual fact, Your Worship,
If I tell you to state the facts as concisely as possible, it is because I wish sentence to be passed without delay. But if you need to call witnesses to support your evidence, have no fear. Even if they are a long way away, we shall have them called here. The motto of the emergency tribunal is severity and justice. Begin.
well, in actual fact, Your Worship, I don't think there's a case for you to hear. I simply got lost in the park, and I want to get out as soon as possible. I'm within my rights, I think. The owner of this house has no option but to let me go. It's truly inconceivable that anyone who owns this park should make difficulties for those people who get lost in it and want to get out.
In principle, I have nothing against your request, which I should say is quite justified. But there's one extremely serious detail. I'm speaking, as you probably guessed, of your manacle.
The manacle? That's just for appearances. I wear it around my ankle like a piece of jewelry. What's surprising about that?
Not really, there's nothing surprising about that. We've seen other things than that. At my age, as you can imagine, I've seen just about everything. You didn't get lost in the park! You were put in that laboratory by the owner of the house who chained you up in that manacle!
Yes, it's true. He chained me up.
And were you alone in the latrine?
Yes.
You mean to say that there was no one chained up there with you?
Yes, I was by myself. I was terribly bored. I filed through the chain and I managed to escape. He had no reason to put me in the lavatory. I filed through the chain and I managed to escape.
Those manacles are no good.
It was very difficult.
Nothing more natural than trying to escape. I've done the same in your situation. Being chained up in that latrine all by yourself can't be very amusing. If you'd had a companion, it would have been a different matter. People can always find something to say to each other, can't they? I'm asking you whether you don't agree with me!
Yes.
Excuse me, get up a moment. Your system won't get you anywhere.
What system?
Your defense system. You lie too much. You weren't in that latrine alone. You were with another man called Bruno, and you were manacled to him.
But he was very ill. He didn't count.
Why did you try to escape on your own?
I tell you, Bruno was very ill.
He didn't want to go with you?
But he couldn't. He could hardly move. He was almost paralyzed.
Wait a minute. So, he was paralyzed then.
Well, almost paralyzed.
And he helped you to run away.
No, he couldn't.
Ah, but he didn't try to stop your going either.
No, he didn't try to stop me from going.
And all the time, you were hurting him terribly.
No, not at all.
This business is going from bad to worse. Bruno wanted to escape, but you didn't want to help him. On the other hand, he tried with all his might to stop your going. And what's worse, is you hurt his ankle terribly while filing through the chain. He still bears the traces. Would you like us to go into the latrine and observe the traces?
No.
You believe me then?
Yes.
You must have made poor Bruno suffer a lot.
Bruno isn't in the latrine.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
Where is he then?
I have no idea.
You've no idea. You were the last with him. That's odd. Very odd.
He must have escaped.
That's impossible. You just said that he was hardly able to move, that he was almost paralyzed.
He may have gotten better, though.
May I be permitted to inform you of certain facts which may throw some light on this case?
Please do.
As you will have realized, Your Worship, the accused is adopting an attitude which might well deceive a tribunal which is inclined to be over-credulous. He's trying to make himself out an honorable man, incapable of wrongdoing. Let us examine the facts with all the necessary accuracy. The accused was brought into the latrine, but he was chained to another man. He had been told that he would be tried as soon as possible. But the accused, instead of quietly awaiting the day of his trial, forces the issue and escapes, which can only be interpreted as an inadmissible act of contempt of court. If he imagined that he was detained in the latrine for no reason, and even in a manner totally devoid of the most elementary courtesies, as he gave us to understand at the beginning of the hearing, then the only possible solution would have been for him to await the court's verdict, which is always in compliance with the law. Now that I've thrown some light on this first point, which might be considered as giving essential information about the attitude of the accused, I'll move on to others. The accused has admitted to having been lost in the park, having not known me, having been chained to another person, etc., etc. This is to say that he has lied several times, and by his lies, tried to create the alibis necessary to conceal his wrongdoing. And I have been informed some striking details by various people who, in these special circumstances, were witnesses to the events which took place in the latrine while the accused was confined there. The accused tortured Bruno at thirst. He was asking only for water. The accused hardly ever took notice. Then he had the idea of filing through the chain so that he could escape. The manacle also secured around Bruno's ankle. And the accused pulled so hard that he made a deep wound. Bruno, overcome by pain and suffering, could do nothing to prevent the tortures that the accused inflicted upon him. Once he was free, he abandoned him without consideration for his thirst. But there's something even worse. My servants have found Bruno's corpse in the park. He had been strangled. Although I am not aware of the precise details, I feel that all the circumstances prove that the accused strangled him.
No, I didn't.
Who did then? Are you going to accuse someone?
He committed suicide
How?
with a lavatory chain.
You're contradicting yourself. You said at first that you could hardly move and he was paralyzed.
He must have made great efforts.
Don't forget that the body was found a long way away from the latrine.
Yes, can dead men walk?
She and I moved Bruno's body. We were afraid that if it was found, I'd be accused of guilty of murder.
Your worship, I feel that it's useless to go any further. If the accused continues, he will end by indicting us all. All the evidence clearly points to his being the murderer, and as such, he should be found guilty at once.
And who's he to talk about being found guilty? He has no reason to talk. That's the cruelest man I've ever met in all my life. This man brought me into his park for no reason and put me in this labyrinth and put me in a filthy lavatory with a kind of living corpse. And all this for no reason, out of sheer cruelty. And he's so cruel, he ill-treats his daughter every day and whips her. Look at me. The good father. The father who loves his daughter. And in any case, Michaela isn't his daughter. Well, all the time he passes himself off as being a good father when he's nothing but a veritable tyrant. Look at Michaela's back. Look, you'll see the traces of blood from when he whipped her last night. Look.
May I ask you to verify the truth of what this man says?
There is no point.
I would be grateful.
not possible!
So that's how you behaved to the man who came and got me out of bed, so that you could be tried at once and not have to wait. The man who showed you nothing but kindnesses and protected you from all sorts of dangers.
He's a criminal. He can make up anything he wants.
How dare you? Oh, actually, I'm nothing but his slave. He holds the right to life and death over me. And besides, he appointed me to try you, and I have the reputation of being the most lenient of all judges on the emergency tribunal. Simply to show you that he has your best interest at heart. I don't need to hear any more. The way you attack him and accuse him is quite evident of your guilt.
No. I want the trial to be based only on the observed actions of the accused from the time he entered the labyrinth without any account being taken of what he has said against me.
You can certainly think yourself lucky. There is not the slightest doubt of the accused's guilt. The accused, from the very beginning of the trial, has told all sorts of lies and would be idle to recall. And what's worse, he has questioned the legal proceedings and attempted to escape. To top this series of offenses, he has tortured his companion in the latrine, strangled him, and tried to dispose of the body in the park. The accused is found guilty of murder. I condemn him to death. The guards will come and fetch him at once at the sound of the drums. If you're not to move from here, the guards will come and fetch you with their drums.
What's that?